In the days running up to Madiba being laid in his final resting place, his longtime friend, struggle comrade, and Robben Island inmate Mac Maharaj took the time to share fond memories of Madiba with visitors at the Nelson Mandela Centre for Memory in Houghton, Johannesburg.
For some time now, had to condition myself to put aside my feelings. Tonight for me is special because I want to do something that takes away our attention from singularly focusing on Madiba. I know from all my association that he would want to be remembered as part of that triumvirate of Madiba, Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo. This is the trio that Rusty Bernstein has said, if ever great men mold nations' history, the interconnection between these three men, these three great men, shaped ours through the decades of struggle which led to the new South Africa. So I speak to you today within that framework and say, never see Madiba outside of the struggle, never see him outside of his two giant colleagues, Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo. That I want to confess today that I did something years ago while Walter was still alive. I went to Madiba privately and I said, Madiba, one of these days Walter is going to die and there needs to be a proper obituary. And I said, that obituary must be written by you. I promise you it will be locked safely in a safe, and it will only be published the day Walter Sir dies. His first response was, why me? And then he said, you're right. And he did it, and it was published in the independent newspapers when Walter died in 2003. It is repeated in the independent supplement this week. I then went to Walter, unknown to Madiba, and said, Chopo, one of these days Madiba is going to die. And we need an obituary. And Chopo got up from his seat and walked into his garden, walked round twice, came back, and there were tears in his eyes, and he said, why me? And I said, you're the only one that can do it. And he wrote it. And so, those two are published today. They're at the end of the supplement. Go and look at it. I think it has very important messages. And I will say this, that I will end with repeating what I've written, what they wrote, especially what Walter wrote about Madiba. But I was using this occasion to confess that, as usual, they brought me up to cheat them, and I have tried tonight to start by taking revenge on both of them wherever I can. Of course, Madiba had set the stage because he has spread the propaganda that I'm a very difficult guy to deal with. And the stories are told and they're legendary, and today I can say it is the truth, that I am a difficult guy. And often I gave them hell in prison, where we first got to know each other. And Madiba would then say, well, what do we do with this chap? Go to Kathy and say, Kathy, go and straighten this boy out. Kathy would come, we'd have a long argument, and he'd go back to Madiba and say, no, Madiba, I give up. That chap has got an answer for everything. Madiba would then go to Walter, say, Kamala, go straighten that boy up. Kathy is failed. Walter would return and say, Madiba, I give up. And then Madiba would come to me. And he would start off by saying, Mac, you're a communist. I said, yes. He said, now, you believe in democratic centralism? Yes. When you've had a debate and you've had a decision and there's a majority decision, what do? I say, I obey it. He says, even if you disagree with it? I say, yes. And what else? I say, I'll fight for it inside the organization, but I'll obey it. He says, thank you very much. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, behave the way a communist should behave. The majority have agreed and you're still differing with us. So I said, no, wait, come here, let's talk. He said, no, nothing more. It's done. Live by your own words. The one story I want to repeat today links with the view about Madiba being a man of gestures. Walter says that Madiba was ruthless in debate. He could be brutal. But the one thing he did in the debate was at the end, he would come back tomorrow and you'd still be able to talk to each other as friends and as comrades. But this style of his, of war by attrition, covered all aspects of his life. When he played sports on Robben Island, and I think those of us who were in Robben Island in those years, I think the majority of us have come out. We've never had time to play those same games again. We need to go back to prison to play them. There's been no time. I don't recall ever playing a game of chess, drafts, dominoes, bridge, tally, nothing. No time for that. But there was a character called Don Davis from another political organization, and he had a real swagger and a real tough guy who would take on the authorities at any time. And he wanted to play drafts with Madiba. Don had a swagger of a walk. It was almost a walk that said, "You kiss my ass." That applied to everybody, prisoners and warders. But with Madiba, it was every day he wanted to play drafts. And they would get into this match, and Madiba would sit, and when his turn comes to move, he would sit still for a long time, and Don would say, "Madiba, move, move." He'd sit, stay quiet. Then he'd snake out his hand and go hovering over this board, and Don's watching him. And he'd go over this piece and hang on there, and Don's watching. And then he'd come to this one, ouch! And then he'd land away. And Don would get a shock. And he sits up. Don says, "Move, Madiba, move." Go back. Do this over and over. And then it'd come a moment when Don doesn't know when it's coming. He'd take his clumsy, thick fingers, pick up a draft piece, and he wouldn't slide it. He'd pick it up, lift it up into the air. And Don's watching this hand. Where the hell is he going to go? And it would come down on the chessboard, and he would shout at the same time, "Coup!" And Don would jump up with shock. And look where. And it would kill him. There were days during that draft match that Don would walk out. Say, "I've had enough of this." Next day, they were back at the draft. That's Madiba. That's Madiba. He knew how to perform according to the person he was dealing with. With me, it was, "Mac, what does a communist do? How does he abide by decisions? Oh, thank you very much. You're a good communist." So, that's Don. That's Madiba. Both are gone. The other thing is that I remember about Madiba is that he came out from prison and he didn't know the value of money. He'd gone to prison when there were pounds, shillings, and pence, and now it's rands. And I remember going up to his place, to his bedroom early one morning on Sunday. We were still in bed and we started talking. And one of the young folks came in from his family and he said, "Tata, we need money for newspapers." And he got up in his pajamas and he went to his trousers and pulled out his wallet. And he took out a 100 Rand note and he gave it. And he said, "Is that enough?" And she said, "Well, we've got to buy all the newspapers." He took out another 100 Rand to give. "Is that enough?" She said, "Yeah, maybe." He took out another one again. And she took it and went away. I said to Madiba, "Hey, do you know what you're doing?" I said, "Do you know how much you gave?" He says, "No. It's for the newspaper." I said, "Listen, the one was enough for the newspapers." He says, "Is that so?" Then there was a day when we were now in government and he was president of the country. And he heard that my wife was ill. Unknown to me, on his way to Joburg, he tells the chaps who were driving him that no, he's got time, he's going to drop in on Zarina. And he goes along and he stops and then says, by the way, just stop at a sweet shop." So they stop and he gives them money and he says, "Go and buy chocolates for the person I'm going to see." He doesn't tell them where he's going. So the guys don't know what to do. They say, what chocolate? He says, anyone, just an expensive one. So they go and buy him a box of Cadbury's chocolates. That was the best there was in that filling station. And they come back and they give it to him and he sees it's a small box. He says, hey, that's too small, man. They say, well, that's the best. He says, well, go and buy another box. So he goes and gives her 2 boxes thinking he's doing her a favor. And this is the cheapest chocolates that you could find in the shops in South Africa. Well, as I said, it's revenge time, but when I talk about revenge, I know everybody talks about Madiba, the reconcilier. Well, in prison, we were told the story by Walter Sisulu that in 1953, Madiba had been elected president of the Transvaal Congress. It had been quite a battle. The Communist Party had been banned, and a whole group of them were very active in the ANC. And when he stood, there was a challenge to his candidature. He won. And that's when Walter went over to the World Youth Festival, and that's when they discussed, the 2 of them conspired that he should consult the Chinese about the possibility of the armed struggle. I'm talking 1953, comrades. Before you were forced. And Walter tells the story that he gets to Beijing, and the Chinese have that news agency called Xinhua News Agency in those days with the telex machines that give you news of the world. And they're giving him Xinhua News every day about news from South Africa. And he's reading there, President of Transvaal ANC has just expelled 2 members of a group called the Bafa Bagia. Bafa Bagia was a group who were former party members who reconstituted themselves in the ANC and now were pushing to make the ANC move more leftward. So the stories of the ANC today are not new. And Walter reads this, General Secretary of the ANC, and Madiba has just expelled 2. Next day, Madiba has expelled 6 of them. Next day, he's expelled 10. And Walter is saying, are we going to be left with any member? But I love that name, Bafa Bagia, because it means we die while we're dancing. And that's where he took us to, through the armed struggle, to be ready to be dead. But as I said, colleagues, while we see all that, I think Madiba was a man of tremendous, tremendous sense of humor. And one of the enduring qualities about him was that he directed often his humor against himself. You all know the story, but I'd like to repeat it today. That as we were heading for after the 94 elections, for the next elections, Madiba was on the campaign trail because he wanted the ANC to win hands down. And there was a challenge from the Democratic Party led by Tony Leon. And Madiba in a public meeting called it a Mickey Mouse party. Tony Leon replied a few days later. He says, you may call my party a Mickey Mouse party, but yours is a goofy government. Well, shortly thereafter, Tony Leon was in hospital, and Madiba heard about it. So he went to visit Tony Leon in hospital. And Tony Leon was in a bed which was shielded by a screen. And Madiba went over, and from behind the screen, he said, Mickey Mouse. This is goofy. I wish a sense of humor would endure amongst all of us for all time. Because we live in a different age. When we had to overthrow apartheid, the means had to be confrontational. But having overthrown it, we now have a democracy where all ideas should thrive, so all parties should thrive. But the essential quality of a democracy is that it defines the playing field and the rules of the game, so that the differences of opinion and ideas can be contested on that playing field. Contested without the confrontation that destroys a country. If we are to live to the legacy of Madiba and his generation, then let us understand the necessity to conduct ourselves according to the rules of democracy. We took revenge on Madiba, even in prison. They started off in our single cells by allowing a priest to come in on a Sunday after about the first year in prison. We were still locked up in our cells with even the wooden doors closed, locked, so you couldn't look out into the corridor, and the priest was made to preach in the corridor. Then we demanded that the wooden doors be opened, and subsequently they opened it a few months later. Then we demanded that we allowed to have the service open and all of us be in the corridor. That was allowed. Then came the day that one of the priests arrived and he said, all those who are Catholics. So the warder stands up and says, the priest wants all those who are Catholics to come to one side. And the late Billy Mac, mischievous brat that he was, shouted Nelson Mandela. Poor Madiba had to go to the Catholic side. Comes the following Sunday, and the Methodist preacher is there, and the warder said, all those who are Methodist, Billy shouts, Madiba. And comes the Seventh-day Adventists, and they say, Jehovah's Witness, and Billy said, Madiba. And we go to work one day, and the quarry, Madiba says, but Billy, what are you doing? And Billy says, hey, you brought us into this trouble. Now you go and pray for us. You just have to go. That's the job of a leader. You go to every session. Governor Becky, the convinced atheist, said, no, I sent it myself. Then we demanded and pleaded that we be open to go and have the service in the sun. And there arrived an Anglican priest, Father Hughes, with his own portable organ. And he invited and led the singing. And it's in the sun. The following time, Father Hughes came. Robben says, he creeps out and he joins us. We say, what are you doing here, old man? Have you become a believer? He says, sunshine and singing. But the best revenge was taken by my daughter when she was probably about 6 years old. During the negotiations facing, yes, Joel, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. That was Madiba's style. But come this Saturday night, I go home and I say to my wife for the rare moment, tomorrow you take a rest. I have no appointments, Kodesa is not taking place. I'll make breakfast, I'll look after the kids. Don't worry, take it easy, babe. And she says, oh, Mac is changing. Anyway, come next morning, I'm up. Early, the kids are up. I tell them, look guys, let mom sleep. There's the rollerblades. You could rollerblade outside in the yard. And the phone rings. It's Madiba. Well, Mac, where are you? I'm in Joburg, Madiba. How far away are you? What do you mean? How long will it take you to come home? 10 minutes. Come over. So I tell the kids, come. And they are protesting now. I say, no, at Madiba's place you can rollerblade. So I take them there and I go from the back, I show them the kitchen, I show them where they can rollerblade. And I walk into the lounge which had frosted glass, sandblasted glass. There's a meeting on and Madiba is in his pajamas and his gown. The meeting is already on. But he's seated in a position where he can see that frosted glass. And at some stage he spots some silhouettes going past. And without asking permission, the meeting goes on. This is the privilege of Madiba. He just gets up and he leaves the room. And he says, carry on. I decide this is smoke break for me. So I walk out and I find Madiba on the veranda. His back is towards me. There's my daughter, and there's my son older than her. And he's leaning over them and he's asking, who brought you here? And I realized, hey, women are the forward gender. Because my son stays quiet. My daughter says, "Our Father." So he says, "Where do you stay?" She says, "Johannesburg, South Africa." Anyway, it goes on and I've had enough. And they spot me and I just burst out laughing. So I tell her, I say, "Joe, you know what Tata was asking. Why didn't you tell him?" She says, "Yes, Dad, but I know what he wants to know, but he's not asking me that question." So she dealt with him, and to the rest of his life, her life, every time he saw her, "Oh, he says, that difficult young lady, he wants me to ask the right question." My best revenge was in prison. We'd been working at the quarry and next to each other with picks, and his pick struck me on my pick handle and on my thumb, and I developed a blue thumb. And that weekend, my mother visited me. I used to always, whenever we had a visitor, and that was once in 6 months, so with all the censorship, you had to try and get some news. You didn't know who was visiting you. Those years, the prison clothes that they gave us, in anticipation of a visit, we would put our pants, fold it nicely, put it under the sisal mat, and sleep on it so that it's going to be having a neat pressed line. All ready for whoever is going to visit you. And hoping that whoever visits you is a female. But on this occasion, my mother visited me. And I was determined across those cubicles with a water behind you and a water behind your visitor, and those perspex cubicles that you had to talk and the intercom. And my mom couldn't speak proper English. So she's trying with a mixture of English, Hindi, Zulu, and Afrikaans to talk with me. And at some point she spots this thumb. And she says, "Stop, let me see that thumb." I know, "Mom, it's nothing. I must see." She said, "What happened?" And she assumed I'd been beaten up. She said, "What kind of revolutionary are you? They're beating you up and you're not telling me." So I said, "Mom, please, calm down, calm down." And the warders realized I'm joking with her. She said, "No ways." I said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "Well, when I get to Cape Town, I'm calling a press conference and I'm telling them." So I said, "Well, Mom, please, when you call that press conference, tell them the name of the warder." She said, "Yes, what's his name?" I said, "Mandela." And she doesn't strike her. She says, "Good, what was his name?" I said, "Mandela." At the end of the visit, I said to her, "Mom, don't forget Mandela." I knew she was going to go meet my wife and friends looking after her, and when she tells the story, they will know what's happening. But anyway, I've done the damage. I come down the ramp into our section, and here the guys are waiting, and Madiba rushes first. Who visited? I say, "My mom." "Oh, my girlfriend. What does she have to say?" I say, "You are in deep trouble. Your girlfriend is calling a press conference." And I tell him the story. It's Madiba who beat me up. Colleagues, I could go on and on. Let me just say that on this occasion, I'd like to end with firstly a point made by Walter Sisulu in his tribute to Mandela. He says this about Madiba. He says, "For the greater part of his life, Mandela was a beacon of the struggle. In death, he stands confirmed as the embodiment of humanity's hope for the future." Walter wrote that in 2002. Secondly, he went on to say, "Truth for Madiba was never something out there clinically defined and dispassionately stated. He combined passion with his search for the truth and understanding, and such understanding implied for him a commitment to act in accordance with it. He was at heart a man of action. And when he loved, he loved. And because he was so generous and giving of himself, he touched so many lives in so many ways, small and big, that we can go on living in hope." And Walter ended that tribute by saying, gracias a la vida. What can we say more than that? Well, I should have something more than that. I think that with all the messages we get of the meaning of Mandela, we should keep on interrogating that. For me, when Madiba went to say farewell at the 4664 concert, those who had drafted his speech had the words that in bidding farewell, he said, he was going to say, it's in our hands, the future. But in delivery, as usual, he changed it. And he turned it around and he said, it's in your hands. And that's where we are.